Good afternoon. My name is Megan Flanagan, and I am the Deputy Executive Director for the National Society of Compliance Professionals. Welcome to today's webinar, How Best to Work with Compliance Consultants. For today's webinar, please note that if time permits, there will be a question and answer period at the completion of the presentation. You can submit your questions using the Q&A box on your screen. If there's no time for Q&A, you can still submit questions to the presenters who will follow up with you via email. Their contact information is located at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. We would also like your feedback, so please take a brief moment to complete the short survey at the conclusion of the webinar. It's my pleasure now to introduce today's webinar presenters, Carlos Guillen from BasisCode, John Wowak from Sipperman Compliance, James Spinelli from Great Valley Advisors, Janaea Mosconi from SEC3, and Jason Owasco from Sipperman. I now turn the webinar over to you.
I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to attend this very informative webinar. At BasisCode Compliance, we receive regular requests for references to leading compliance consultants. This is why we have partnered with NSCP and these industry experts to present today's topic. As you can see from this distinguished set of panelists, we're going to be hearing from multiple compliance consultants and a client perspective on how to best work with compliance consultants. My name is Carlos Guillen. I'll be your moderator. I am founder and CEO of BasisCode Compliance. We are a technology platform focused on centralizing and efficiently maintaining an effective compliance program through the use of various integrated tools, including BasisCode Personal Trading Manager, BasisCode Insider Trading Manager, BasisCode Essentials, consisting of Compliance Calendar, Gifts and Entertainment, Form Studio, Risk Assessments, and internal and external certifications, attestations, questionnaires, with the ultimate goal of maintaining audit readiness. It is important to highlight that BasisCode Compliance is consultant agnostic, meaning that many consultants deliver their services through our platform. While a consultant is not a requirement to use BasisCode Compliance, it is nice to know that you will have the option familiar with your platform when one is desired. I'm going to turn it over to John Wowak to introduce himself.
Thanks, Carlos and NSCP for having me today. I am the COO of Sipperman Compliance. I've spent 15 years in business operations, finance, and compliance. Our model at CCS is both a fully outsourced CCO and compliance function, as well as support roles to in-house CCO and compliance staff. My main job at Sipperman is to align the resources and find the right consultants with the business partners that we have and our clients. I believe my experience as both a buyer and seller of compliance services over the years gives me a good perspective for today's webinar. James, over to you.
Thank you, John, and thank you to the NSCP and everybody on the call for having me. I'm James Spinelli. I'm the COO of Great Valley Advisor Group. We are a technology-focused SEC-registered investment advisor. We offer independent solutions for financial advisors and multiple custodians and third-party money managers. And we're going to give a perspective from the standpoint of how we've utilized the compliance consultant through our everyday routines as a firm. And we offer this to RIA-only and hybrid RIA advisors of the firm. And with that, I'll hand it over to Janaea.
Good afternoon. My name is Janaea Mosconi. I started my career at the SEC in Philadelphia. And I consider myself lucky because while I was at the SEC, I had the opportunity to work on various types of exams. Generally, the staff is organized so that certain staff do broker-dealer exams, certain staff do investment advisor exams. But while I was there, I had the opportunity to work on both broker-dealers, advisors, investment companies, transfer agents. So it gave me a good broad-based background to start my career. After I worked at the SEC, I took a position at BASIS when they had a consulting division, and then I worked full-time as a compliance person at Bank of Hawaii prior to the compliance rule. And 15 years ago, I started the firm SEC Compliance Consultants, and we offer ongoing compliance assistance to firms, mock audits. We help firms register, and just a slew of different services, anything they need related to compliance and how to comply with FINRA and SEC regulations. Now for Jason's intro.
Thanks, Janaya. My name is Jason Owasco. I work with John Wowak at Zipperman Compliance Services, where I serve as a director and also serve as a chief compliance officer for a number of our RIA and broker-dealer clients. In addition to that functionality, I also oversee the annual review process that we do across our client base, as well as the marketing reviews for all of our clients. Most recently at Zipperman, I began to get more involved with our business development and sales role with our principal, Todd Zipperman, and that's shed an interesting light on seeing right into the client's business and what they're looking for in an outsourced compliance function, and where some of the pain points are as they decide to either go from an in-house role to an outsourced role, or to replace an existing outsourced resource. So hopefully I can add some of that insight to today's webinar. Carlos.
Today, I will be asking the panelists questions on the following topics. Why, how, and when is a good time to hire a third-party consultant? What to look for when finding the right consultant? What to expect related to costs, implementation, and timing? Maximizing the return on your investment? Various types of engagements with consultants? Leveraging consultants to evaluate other third-party relationships, such as technology and other vendors? And then at the end of the presentation, we will address any of the questions submitted during the webinar. Janaya, when should a firm consider hiring a third-party compliance consultant?
So thank you, Carlos. I would say, the short answer is anytime you have a question related to compliance. But over the past 15 years, we've seen a trend in terms of when firms call us for assistance. So just starting with new firms that are registering, they, I would say, get the biggest bang for their buck when they hire us, because usually you consider them as the most unfamiliar with what's expected from the SEC. So during the preparation for registration and in the initial months of registration, they can gain an understanding for what they actually can manage in-house versus what they may need a consultant to help them with. If you're working with an ex-regulator, you can also learn from the consultant during this process regarding what the SEC expects in terms of your disclosure, your policies, your compliance testing. You can learn the various options. A lot of times with the advisor's rules, they're not black and white, and you have options. So it's nice to have that knowledge from the beginning if there's ways that you can approach your compliance program that make sense for your business. Another advantage to working with a consultant during the startup phase is that you can learn how to stay up to date with the compliance rules. So again, on the advisor side, the rules aren't in a nice, neat package in any one place. You really have to piecemeal the information together from various sources. And so having a consultant by your side through that process, you can learn, how do I stay up to date on an ongoing basis? We've also found that firms come to us if there's an internal CCO that's leaving, or there's some sort of transition internally. Here, a consultant is helpful to make sure you're getting all of the information necessary from the departing employee, and there's a smooth transition and excellent document retention. So oftentimes, finding the books and records can be a headache. Certain things may be in emails, others in the cloud. You also want to make sure that the latest version of documents is easily obtainable. Compliance experts know what to request from that departing employee, and sometimes it's helpful to have a party helping you through that transition. The dual hat situation, here we find that we have a lot of partnerships where we help firms with ongoing compliance. First, firms like that it's cost effective because they can have a firm officer internally maintain the title and liability, but a consultant can do much of the heavy lifting. And it helps with the independence perception since the CCO may be also doing other activities at the firm, and so it may create a conflict there. There's significant changes that can occur to the business, to the regulations, and a lot of times we have clients call us during these times, say they're creating a new business line, or they have a new side letter for a private fund manager. They may want feedback from us, so they call us during these times. If they have an SEC exam, they want help, navigating that SEC exam, we can help them with that. We also even get people inquiring when they have, or to just learn that they're going to go through an SEC exam, but yet they haven't done what they need to do, so they call us sort of on a last-minute basis, which doesn't give us so much time to help, but we try our best to point them in the right direction. Other firms we help and that go to consultants for assistance are firms that are high risk of an exam. So if the firm has been examined in the past, has had issues, if they haven't been examined in a long time and they're worried that the SEC is going to come in and do an exam, and then also this may include firms that are included, somehow they're pulled into the SEC's priorities at that point. Like, for example, right now an ETF manager might have more concern that they want to get their program looked at in advance of an SEC exam because the SEC is focusing on ETF managers right now. And then the last thing I'll highlight for why firms consider an outside consultant is enforcement cases often are settled with requirements that the firm has to hire an independent compliance consultant for a period of time to oversee the compliance. So we've done a lot of these types of reviews for firms that are required to hire a consultant. And similarly, many institutional clients require advisors to hire an independent consultant periodically, like every 2 years. Some pension advisors require, or pension firms require that the advisors do an independent review, so we get involved in these reviews as well.
Thank you, Janaea. James, Can you talk about your experience with your decision to hire a third-party consultant?
Sure. So GVA was already offering compliance as part of our value add to the advisors and our clients, and we actually felt pretty comfortable with the solution that we were providing as a firm until we experienced our first SEC exam and an audit, and we regrouped kind of at the stakeholder level and said, do we have to add another layer to the program? And we considered, what are the teams that are available out there, someone who specializes in compliance that could better help us prepare the compliance arm and the individuals that reside within that compliance arm of the firm. And then in addition to that, at the same time, when you add another element into the firm itself, such as an in-house money management program, which we rolled out a couple years ago, and start managing models, there's a different layer of compliance that has to go along with that, agreements and other factors where that's going to significantly benefit the business to use a consultant, and that's, as Janaea had said earlier. So instead of a new product, I would probably classify the decision as more of a strategy. And then lastly, it's really an independent validation of what you're currently doing. So we were able to validate the strengths and weaknesses of the compliance program. For one, we knew what we knew, and we were kind of living inside of that bubble of what we were doing on a daily basis and what we were doing on a monthly and a quarterly basis. But it was what we didn't know that was pretty much the most concerning. So being able to utilize a program that has involvement in different programs and other firms has significantly helped, and I think it will continue to help us with future endeavors.
Thanks, James. John, what types of work can a consultant do?
Sure, Carlos. There's a lot that a consultant can do depending on what type of relationship and how to customize it based on the client's needs. I'll go over a few of them. Fully outsourced CCO is where the consulting firm would take on all compliance responsibilities and take a proactive approach to running the compliance program. They may or may not have in-house compliance people working with them, but they're really in charge of the entire CCO or compliance program. We also can build a support model to an in-house CCO or possibly a dual hat person in-house that will supplement the work for the compliance staff. So if there's certain areas of need in the compliance department, the consultant could step in and do that work as instructed. There could also be project-based work. So as projects arise, such as trade testing, look back, items like that, a consultant could be hired for. As Janaea said before, mock audits, independent verifications, always good to get a checkup every now and then. One of the other items that we're consulting firms relied upon are short-term support during a CCO transition. So if your CCO was out on medical leave and you had an immediate need, or there was a termination or separation of the CCO, a good outsourcing firm could step in and work during that transition period. Consultants can also do training, regulation adoption, As new regulations come out, they can go in and train some of the advisors and reps. We could also administer compliance technology platforms, such as BasisCode and others that are out there. We could work with registrations, do marketing reviews, so certain types of compliance steps along the way. One of the latest ones is cybersecurity. So a lot of firms the compliance staff don't have the expertise to deal with the information technology side of their business. And something that consultants are doing now is partnering or gaining that experience to bring the cybersecurity program from the SEC and FINRA's perspective in through the compliance consulting. And I think it all wraps up on your decision points and considerations, and whether you can scale the relationship based on your economics and needs, and how to identify exactly what you need and what can that consultant provide. What types of industry experience and best practices does that consultant bring to the table? And then whether you're institutional clients or consultants, they always want checks and balances on management. It's always good to have a consultant in there to provide that independent check.
Thanks, John. Now, James, from a client perspective, what should a firm consider when hiring a consultant?
The first main thing is absolutely the reputation of the compliance firm and its principles. I think that's true. That holds true with any consultant within the space itself. And so we had much due diligence that went into this, and after much research and looking at the specialized teams and who can help out from a compliance standpoint, we ended up partnering with Zipperman Compliance Services just as an industry leader and strong backgrounds. And after meeting with Todd and the rest of the team, we felt very comfortable, and they were able to work with us to roll out some changes within our environment. The experience piece is going to come in as extremely important as well. You know, our advisors and our clients trust us as fiduciaries. They want us to provide them with the most up-to-date industry information and be able to also handle unique situations. I think that's where, when I was speaking earlier with living inside of that bubble, you now have the opportunity to explore some different areas and provide them with feedback based on what else is happening out there. So that experience is going to play a crucial role, and from trading to maybe agreements and get us to a solution. But we also work with individuals that are directly assigned to our firm, and so the ability to run ideas by them, and they can actually use that to run ideas off of other individuals is very important for what we're doing. And then lastly, it's just that culture of compliance. So we have a very strong culture as a firm to begin with, specifically around compliance, obviously, with the handling of customer information. But we want to provide the most important industry updates. We want to provide it in a timely fashion, but we also don't want to be bombarding the advisors of the firm with information or constant requests or always kind of intertwining ourselves into their business. So there is a little bit of a fine line where you want to provide them with the necessary updates, ones that are definitely relevant to what's happening out there, but not overwhelm anybody or scare them when it comes to compliance. So you try to keep it interesting, and we feel very comfortable with keeping that culture that way.
Thank you very much, James. Janae, can you please add to what the firm should consider when hiring a compliance consultant?
Sure. I found, like, at the highest level, the best consultants can do two things if you just put it in two buckets at the highest level. Number one, they can find the answers quickly if they don't know them on the fly. They know where to go to find the answers. And number two, that they're reliable and diligent. Beyond these two fundamental qualities you want your consultant to have, there are also, like, so many other nuances that firms think are important. And so consulting firms need to be flexible just so that they can sort of, offer customized service to their clients that meets their needs. So in terms of due diligence, you should include asking questions related to the assigned consultant and checking references. While the firm reputation is definitely important, you also want to really dig into who you're going to be working with, because firms can present, obviously, the great people that they have, in the initial meetings, and then you could end up being provided with a consultant that's maybe doesn't have the same experience level. So first, I would say, asking questions around who's going to be your assigned consultant or your assigned team, read the bios for who you'd be assigned to work with, and talk to those people. Does their specific experience add value? That's what you want to be assessing. Consulting firms vary, and so you need to make sure you are hiring the firm that meets your needs. Do you need a broker-dealer expert, for example? Then you want to be looking for a firm that has ex-FINRA or ex-SEC broker-dealer examiners. Do you need someone to assist you with registering an investment advisor? You want to be asking questions like how many registrations has that consultant done that you'd be working with? Is the new firm registering related to a multinational firm, and is it in need of participating affiliate letters? In that case, you would want to have a consultant familiar with Unibanco-related matters. So you really need to find a consultant that's flexible and willing to work with you in the way that you need the consultant to work. Not all consulting firms are the same. Like I said, some firms have consultants who are ex-regulators. Other firms may not. From a marketing perspective, we pitch that fact. That's like, our niche is that we have ex-regulators on staff. And we think that's filling a knowledge gap of why firms, hire consultants. Usually firms have counsel, so they don't necessarily need a legal perspective, but they're hiring the consultant to prep for the SEC scrutiny, and this is when that ex-examiner perspective is key. On the flip side, maybe your CCO already has that SEC background, and this is not important to you. Different firms have different gaps, and so when you're looking for a consultant, it makes a lot of sense to know where your knowledge gap is. You obviously want a consultant that's proactive and reactive. So be sure to address service levels during your due diligence, including your access to the consultant and response time. One way is to ask the firm's policy on turnaround and insist on a team and not just one person in case you can't get a hold of that particular consultant.
Thank you, Janea.
Thanks.
Jason, can you talk about how firms go about finding a suitable consultant?
Sure. Thanks, Carlos. And you didn't ask the second question there, are all consultants the same? I was going to comment that no, if you ask John and I, Sipperman is clearly the best. And if you ask Janea, I think she would say her firm is the best. So hopefully every firm would say that. A little bit of due diligence will probably show that the firms that play in this space all have their own niche. As Janea mentioned, hers is the ex-regulatory person niche. Ours is a little more focused on former in-house compliance people who have been around for, unfortunately, a couple of decades like myself. So as far as some specific angles to take there, prior experience can be important. There are enough firms out there now that have dealt with compliance consultants maybe on a project basis, and now you're looking to expand that work. You can always lean back on firms you worked with in the past and other ones you considered when you hired that firm. There are also, as I said with Sipperman, this is the case, there are many people you may have worked with in an in-house role in the past, and a person has gone into a consulting firm, and so there's some level of familiarity there that you can capitalize by reaching out to that firm. Centers of influence is important, particularly from where we stand, as we generate a tremendous number of referrals from centers of influence. And by that, I mean industry attorneys and service providers like administrators and custodians. We deal with a number of them across our entire client base, and we develop those relationships just naturally as a part of the client relationships that we have. And when those relationships are good and productive, the centers of influence are certainly willing to pass along our name. So any firm looking for a consultant, that's an excellent place to start. As far as the due diligence process is concerned, and Janaya touched on this a little bit, we would agree that it's very important. As a buyer looking for a compliance consultant, you want to make sure there's a fit. Without that, no matter how good the compliance knowledge may be, the relationship may not be great just because there's not a good personality or style fit. Anecdotally, as a practice, when we bring on new clients, part of our process with every prospecting effort is to go on site with the firm looking to hire us to make sure that there is a fit. That's our due diligence, the flip side of the prospective client's due diligence. But we think that's of value to them as well, because that gives them an opportunity to meet with us face-to-face, ask questions, evaluate the team, priceless digging as far as I'm concerned. And then the last item, certainly speaking to a colleague is a great way to get some information. I think that's probably true not only for the compliance consulting space, but any professional services scenario. If you have peers or friends of peers who have dealt with a compliance consultant in the past, definitely a great place to start, at least to get a name and an idea of who's out there. And the compliance consulting industry, I think, is wide enough now that it shouldn't be too difficult to find a few peers who have had the experience and can offer their insights as to who may be a potentially good fit for purposes of hiring a consultant.
Thanks,
Carlos?
James.
Sure.
James, what was your experience with finding a suitable compliance consultant?
Thanks, Carlos. So Jason really hit the nail on the head with a lot of his previous remarks on what we look for as a client of one of these firms. But finding a suitable compliance, are all consultants the same? I mean, the short answer is no. And we did enough due diligence to really understand that fully, because when we first started the RIA, we obviously had in-house, and then as we grew, we felt the need to add that other layer. But there was a lot of out-of-the-box solutions, and it was kind of astonishing how many of those cookie-cutter solutions were available. But after you go through the introductory phone calls, you ask the right questions, you understand who you're going to be working with, do they have the ability to understand what your firm is going to do, the agreements, the filings, the regulatory oversight. You pretty much come to the reality that these solutions, well, they might be well priced. They're pretty much glorified Excel spreadsheets without having somebody dedicated to your firm, or it's more of like an 800 number. So it's easy to see why we could have gone down that path, and that RIAs do go down that path based on the cost. But at the end of the day, when we were talking about it, we realized that it's probably going to end up costing us just more money or more headaches with having to assign that to somebody within the office, making them the compliance go-to, they're updating the spreadsheets. And then once you start adding different elements to your business, so for instance, you want to incorporate financial planning agreements, the money management, maybe fee-based 401ks, that those resources really become limited, and then you end up just having to reinvent the wheel and start over. Attending relevant industry conferences is obviously very important. You know, we're going in a couple different directions with Great Valley Advisor Group with what we offer to our advisors. We still have a CCO in-house, and we feel like he's the best one in the country, and he would love for me to say that on this call, and I'm sure most RIAs would say that, but he just doesn't have the capacity or the bandwidth to gather as much information as the consultants do, you know, based on what they're seeing in the industry and how they're dealing with other clients within the firm itself. And so you would hope that the individuals you have assigned to your firm would attend conferences, would complete training, would be learning from other analysts or officers within their own office. And I think that really generates a good culture of compliance, and it keeps them constantly focused on that one subject versus, you know, what we're doing at Great Valley outside of compliance.
Thanks, James. Next, Janaya, can you discuss some of the doubts and concerns that firms have when hiring a consultant?
Sure, Carlos. Just starting with the first bullet, that consultants, it might not be an accepted practice by regulatory agency to rely on a third party. The SEC really only wants to know if you have a competent person at the helm and that the compliance program is being addressed. Is there tone at the top and accountability? If these essential elements are intact, using an external compliance person is completely acceptable, you know, in my opinion. The SEC issued a risk alert sharing best practices, and this is a great resource for anyone who has this concern. Just going to the second point here, that the outside consultant might not know your business as well as an inside person. Management needs to communicate fully to internal compliance as well as lawyers and consultants. So what we find is many times as consultants, we're informing legal counsel because we're closer to the day-to-day activity at the firms. And so we often, during our testing, will find things that we think are important for disclosure purposes and then take that back to the lawyers. And there's other things beyond disclosure that come up as well, where we're interacting with legal and saying, okay, these are things you may not have been aware of based on your conversations with the client. So in a way, we act like a team in that regard. The last one here, lack of direct experience relating to, did I skip one? Let me see. No. Okay, lack of experience related to advisor's business. So here, this comes back to hiring the right consultant, and it's a valid concern. Not all consultants or consulting firms have the right experience, and so, like, you just really need to know where your knowledge gap is, like what your internal employees know versus where do you need to fill in the gap with a consultant. I think that's an important process to work through.
Thank you, Janaea. James, can you provide a client's perspective?
Sure, Carla. So, absolutely. I mean, I think Janaea once again hit the nail on the head with the different areas and just the knowledge around who you're going to work with and are they going to be geared towards the industry that you're in, specifically what you're trying to focus on. So, for instance, with institutional client mandates, we have the opportunity at Great Valley Advisor Group to work with institutional clients, and so one of the main areas of that is the RFP process. And in that RFP process, we get the questions a lot on how does the compliance work. They scrutinize the agreements and they ask, we do see that you have a CCO and you do have in-house compliance analysts, but you're also utilizing a firm on the outside. What is that relationship like? And do they really understand what you're doing? And it's through, obviously, very strong communication and explaining to them how Zipperman integrates with Great Valley with the level of additional oversight and explaining to them that not only are you going to get what we see, but you're also going to get access to what the consultants see, that it becomes more of an area of, when it starts from like an area of concern and it turns more of like an area of positive interest into, oh, we understand that you now have this additional opportunity for us, and it's included in that RFP process. It's included with working with you. So that's always a positive feedback to get. Cost versus value. The decision to partner with a compliance firm was probably one of the bigger decisions we made. We're focused on culture. I've said that earlier. We believe in being fully transparent with our advisors, and we understood that getting there was going to be a financial cost. There was also going to be a cost to our business in terms of culture. We didn't really know what specifically we were getting ourselves into because we already had that compliance arm established. Are they going to understand our policies and procedures? We're a little bit unique with our setup. Is that going to be frowned upon when they look at what we're doing? Are they going to come in and say, oh my gosh, what is Great Valley doing? Not that I thought we were doing anything wrong, but they might say you just haven't been doing it right. We need to kind of steer the ship. Basically, are we going to have to uproot your business? And I mean, any business owner or COO out there will say, there's a significant cost to all of that. And those questions should run through your head. If they don't, I really don't know what to tell you, but this is something we strongly considered. So if you add up all the costs, you start understanding the value, you kind of do the ROI. At the end of the day, you look at it as a way to help you scale. And by scaling a firm, you obviously can add significant value. And the answer for us was yes. And it had a lot to do with asking the right questions up front and knowing exactly what we were going to pay for and the value that was going to be brought to the table. The last piece here with the inadequate exposure and transparency, I haven't talked much about technology, but a lot of what your firm is concerned about can be accomplished through technology solutions, through strong CRM systems, paperless signatures, integrated compliance software. A lot of that cybersecurity and information you can get from working with a compliance consultant. And all of these systems, combined can help you share that important information in a secure fashion and allow you to be more transparent than you probably would be without those tools. So it helps bridge that gap.
Thank you, James. John, can you please take a moment to discuss costs, implementation time, and the reasons for hiring or not a consultant?
Sure, Carlos. I think we've touched on a lot of these, so I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. But I think some of the reasons for not hiring a consulting firm, either as being a buyer of it in my past or what we hear now at Zipperman, is first and foremost the budget and how to handle costs is probably the single factor in trying to align the finance budget and making sure that those costs go into it, especially in a startup business. I think another one is the willingness to share info and having the transparency necessary to integrate a consultant into your business. Sometimes it's very hard to involve an outside consultant in the day-to-day operations and make sure that they have the information to design that compliance program. Another one is onboarding and learning curve. There's this perception out there that it takes consultants a period of time to get up to speed in the business, and the business is going by and making sure that they get integrated as fast as possible, sometimes not fast enough for some of the potential clients. Another one, team member turnover, having the fear that once you hire a consultant, if one of those, you don't really control their employment, so if one or two of those consultants on your team or the key consultant should leave the firm, you would have to retrain a new team. And then I think the second, aside from the cost, is the lack of control over the program and personnel. So being able to control schedules, vacations, and really being integrated with somebody from the outside. And one other one that we do see is the resistance of the true assessment of the compliance program. It's very hard when you're running in-house, you're running your compliance program for a period of time or sometimes years, to have an outside consultant come in and be very critical or bring new things that you're used to doing or management's used to doing, and everybody's resistant to change. So I think those are the main reasons most firms do not hire a consulting firm off the bat.
Thank you, John. James, did you encounter any hurdles when hiring a consultant?
Yeah, so I think John did a good job of explaining it, but I'll just run through this pretty fast. I mean, is there a cost associated with hiring a consultant? Absolutely. Is it worth it? From our standpoint, yes. From how the direction we're going in, but I'm a firm believer in you get what you pay for, and more importantly, if you want to do something right, that it's going to take some time, and that's just how it goes within the business world. So our biggest hurdle was really explaining it to the advisors and the clients that we were going to hire a consulting firm. I mean, there's no bigger hurdle than that, because if you don't get buy-in from key people within your organization, it can be detrimental to how you conduct business. So, we ultimately stressed that it was an added benefit. It was nothing more than trying to just enhance an already established program. And once we did that, and we held key meetings, and we met with the Zipperman folks in our office, and we talked through how we do the onboarding process, and it was pretty straightforward. The meetings and the documents provided, and it takes time, but it's good because you kind of revitalize things in a sense. So.
Thank you, James. Janaya, can you please discuss how to get the most value out of the services and expertise that consultants provide?
Sure, Carlos. So first, you want to understand the contract and the deliverables. So what is the scope of agreed services? I think sometimes there can be confusion there, and there's so many different offerings out there. So you want to make sure you know what you're signing up for. And actually to even have a firm that's flexible. So you may start with one program, but you may want to be able to change it over time if it's not exactly matching up with what you need. We keep our contracts very broad, so there's a lot of room for us to switch gears and focus on other tasks if the client's needs change. We clarify consultant responsibilities in the compliance calendar rather than in the contracts with regard to the specific areas so that everybody could stay on the same page about who's doing what. But in the contracts, we pretty much say, here's all the things we can do as part of this program. And then the calendar would be the go-to document to see who's doing what. You want to look at your risk and obviously hit on the highest risk areas. So if you're not doing that already internally, that's where you could first allocate consultant time to those riskier areas. or areas maybe that you just don't have the expertise to address in-house. So this requires, I guess I've said this, I think I keep saying this, but it really requires getting a good understanding of what your employees' strengths and weaknesses are, where your consultants' strengths are, and also just understanding when to even call counsel versus calling a consultant. So we believe like our offering is different from like a law firm, but it's complementary services we offer. So in the end, you'll find like a law firm will be doing things like corporate structuring, drafting offering documents, weighing in when there's a gray area of compliance and you really should have a legal opinion if you're going to take a liberal approach to something. And then from a cost perspective, a lot of times law firms will refer business to consulting firms to do things like policies and procedures and ADV drafting. It's also appropriate to consider like an ex-regulator to be doing a mock audit versus a law firm because that's their specialty. And next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Janaea.
Sure.
James, from your experience, how does a firm maximize the contribution received from consultants?
Thanks, Carlos. So I'll just run through these again pretty quickly here, but set expectations early and often. You know, listen and understand what exactly you're getting yourself into. Explain it to your team. Receive input back from the consultants. Understand if that's going to be a good fit within your environment already. And they need to be aware of all areas, not just what's happening within your firm itself. So, you know, set expectations on what you can expect. You know, on the starting point from onboarding it and then the go-forward basis, you want to communicate on issues with the firm early and often. This is extremely, extremely important because the more you hide information, the worse it will be in the long run. So make sure you're always communicating if you have any issues that you're facing as a firm. So, you know, trying to hide maybe an audit or trying to hide something that happened in the past and you don't want to bring it up because you're afraid that it will be highly scrutinized. At the end of the day, that's usually not a good business decision. And so if you don't provide the consultants with the info, there's not much that they're going to be able to do. And in the long run, it will hurt you, like I said earlier. And so those audits and other regulatory exams that you might go through, just general advisory concerns, don't be scared to tell anybody about that. And then also develop yourself a nice integrated compliance calendar. So if you already have one, edit it, update it, you know, refresh it, and stick to it. You know, customize it to as you see fit. Work with the team to utilize whatever calendar they may have, and go over new ideas or, you know, track ongoing daily, weekly, quarterly, or annual tasks for the team and see where those gaps are.
Thank you, James. John, can you share how consultants provide the most value to a firm?
Sure, Carlos. I think whether you're an investment professional on this webinar or we work very close with investment professionals, we all know that they look at every business transaction as a trade and what value, no matter the value, what they can extract from it. So I think you need to determine how does your firm or the investment professionals and leaders of your firm capture value. Some of the things that we try to offer as consultants is the customized approach and program. Buying something off the shelf and not customizing it to the program creates delays, creates wasted documents, created wasted procedures. The more customized approach, the more streamlined and the less time or value or less time that we pull investment professionals or others closer to the business off the trading desk. Some of the other things to provide value is obviously the cost effectiveness. I think we've beaten that into submission during this webinar. Team approach and industry experience. As we talked about is what does the firm or the particular consultant bring to your firm as far as experience in the business strategy that you're trying to deploy. The efficient proactive implementation and monitoring of a program. Identifying issues and problems ahead of time during strategy sessions. Having that transparency in relationship with management that does create value. And I think one of the other things is having a structured annual review process, that the annual review is not one point in time, but it's an ongoing monitoring of your compliance program that's able to adapt as your business changes, as your people change, as regulations change. And then I think one underestimated one is the availability and responsiveness of your consultant, making sure that they react to issues on a timely basis so that the firm can keep moving and go in the direction of getting the most value for the ultimate clients of the firm going forward.
Thanks, John. James, can you speak to the value a consultant can bring to the firm?
Absolutely, Carlos. So the regulatory exam pedigrees is obviously very important. So, as the firm you partner with, are they experienced with regulatory exams before? Are they familiar with key areas and what recent exams that have occurred, what they focused on? Can they bring that element to the table and understand who is going to be best prepared to answer those questions? Of course, with any audit, there's going to be the one-off request, which you might not be able to answer. You have to get back to the regulator on. But there really is no better feeling than the comfort of knowing you have a team in place that has that experience within the regulatory exam environment. And so you want to refocus and revitalize your compliance and operations. I did speak about this a little bit earlier, but let your advisors and clients know that you've invested time and money into the program. You're focused on continuing to learn new information. It shouldn't be viewed as something that may be wrong with the firm. We got a couple questions saying, hey, is something going on? Why are we bringing in these compliance consultants? And so you want to make sure that you explain that on the forefront. Looking back, we probably should have done a better job of that. Or maybe someone within your compliance department might feel like they're not doing their job right, or you're encroaching on that. And so you want to just position yourself as you're investing into your program to help it grow. And then also, we've obviously talked about this a ton on the call as well, but the cross-client best practices, I would say that's probably one of the biggest value adds, is just being in the know of industry trends, knowing what other firms are experiencing. That information is invaluable. And so from the information we've learned so far and the updates that we've made to our program, it kind of speaks for itself with regards to that.
Thanks, James. Janaea, types of engagements that firms can have with consultants. Can you share with us some of the differences?
Sure. There's varying degrees of support that we provide clients that might be different from what other consulting firms are offering, but a lot of the packages or service lines look similar across firms. Right now, it's clear the SEC is looking at outsourced CCOs that provide this service to several different firms. And so we try to counter that by having only a few names per ADV. So if we have a consultant that's acting as an outsourced CCO, that as long as it's a straightforward firm, they just take a few on. And so we make sure that we stay out of the light from the SEC if we take on that full-on CCO role. The next level, a service short of taking on the CCO title, involves managing the compliance program but not holding the title. We do this for firms where the person who is the CCO holds another title as well, like CFO, and they need support for the compliance function. Several firms hire consultants to provide varying degrees of support where they may direct the program internally and have us or another firm be supplementing their program with various tasks. So here this can be offered as a basic partnership or a more enhanced, and there's different pricing that goes along with it. So it's important to know that firms offer different packages. Oftentimes it's hard to get an apples-to-apples comparison when you're looking at different firms. And so the advice that I usually give is for firms that are doing the due diligence to compare the bios. It's really important to look at that experience and the consultant's allocation of time to the client to assess the cost and the value versus other consultants.
Thank you, Janaea. John, can you talk a little bit about the differences between a fully outsourced consultant relationship and a consultant support engagement? And then afterwards, I'd like to turn it to James to let us know about his experience as a client.
Sure, Carlos. I think Janaea hit some of those right on the head. Between a fully outsourced model and a support, obviously the proactiveness of a fully outsourced, having I guess as we have written here, skin in the game, but it's the liability. The shift of liability from management and some of the compliance staff to an outside consultant is attractive to some of the firms that are out there, given their knowledge of compliance, the regulations, and interacting with the regulators. So I think first and foremost, it is that shift of liability, which creates higher engagement and proactiveness from the fully outsourced model versus the support, which is more a reactionary model. Some of the others is the fully outsourced is looked as more integrated into management, more as a business partnership versus a pure vendor relationship. Fully outsourced also is looked at as being independent, making sure that they do have a seat at the table, whether it's on the investment committee, compliance committee, or somewhere integrated with a board or an advisory board. And then from a support standpoint, the integration, or there's more staff to manage, more information to share out there coming at it from a support. I think the most important thing when considering the differences between an outsourced and support model is you have to make sure all of the stakeholders in your business plan are aligned, that all the goals that you're trying to achieve from your operations or your compliance or monitoring controls that you have in place is make sure that all of the stakeholders are aligned. And then ask yourself, how will you integrate and how will your compliance program be initialized and maintained? So whether you have a full outsource and you're prepared to have an outside consultant run your entire program, or you just want areas to be supported. And then ask the consultant or the firm from the fully outsourced perspective, how many times are you going to visit my office? How many times are you going to meet with me face to face so that you can understand our business? How many meetings are we going to have? How are we going to interact? Is it just through email? Will it be calls? Will it be video conferencing? So making sure that those interactions, and from the fully outsourced perspective, truly outweigh the support model.
Thanks, John. Jason, James.
Yeah, no problem. So we chose as a firm, we chose the support route. We did not go with the fully outsourced model. It was just an internal decision as a business that we wanted to continue to have the CCO in-house, and we wanted to work because we felt that there was areas, as John was just explaining, you kind of identify those areas during the reviews of your firm to say, do you want to have an outsourced model, or would you rather keep this, do more of the support structure? So, along those lines, as you outline exactly what you want to focus on and how you want to work with that support team to bring, additional value to the business, whether it's risk assessments and regulatory matters for the executive management, ADV filings. Those are really the key areas that we wanted to focus in on, and we said, how can we best partner? And we just didn't feel the full outsource we were there yet, but that's a discussion that might have to be had down the road, and so that's where we are.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Jason, can you discuss how consultants can assist firms in evaluating compliance technology and other vendor relationships?
Sure. So, I think it could be, whether it's technology providers or any other providers for that matter, prior experience is sort of the most basic way to find ones that you like and that you could put in front of a client. As a consultant dealing with a pretty varied client base, we've had exposure to a wide number of relevant vendors, including a variety of tech vendors that would be suitable for this equally wide variety of firms that we deal with. And that's based on a number of considerations. It could be the headcount of the client, it could be AUM, it could be their tech savvy, and importantly, it's often budget size. So we've seen quite a bit, and we have a sort of a small cadre of vendors that we can put in front of our clients and usually find a fit pretty quickly. And speaking of budget size, good segue into cost comparisons. Oftentimes it comes down to cost, right? It's not too difficult to find a group of vendors that are similar in terms of what they bring to the table in terms of service offerings, and that's true of us as well. Let's face it, we fall into that same bucket, and it often comes down to cost. And sometimes the trick can be, what does the cost really look like, and we like to think that we're in position to help contribute to that discussion because, we may have insights into what the real cost is. For instance, there may be a set monthly fee or a set annual fee for those services, but there could be sort of unadvertised startup costs at times or additional costs for add-on services as the relationship progresses. So having had some experience with that, we can sort of push clients in the right direction to be on the lookout for those things and be able to make a smart decision. It's also important to align the needs of the firm with the technology that's out there. So again, we've had quite a bit of experience working with a variety of firms, and we like to think we can effectively evaluate legitimate tech needs as opposed to getting the biggest list of technology services that sounds great on paper, but really may not be that relevant to what the firm really has to have in place. And obviously cost is a factor there too. We've seen some firms that are really interested in getting the quote unquote best technology that's out there regardless of cost, but that's pretty rare. More often firms are looking for what it takes to get compliant in an affordable way, that they can feel comfortable that they're set up well for an examination scenario. And again, that's true not only of a tech provider, but even a compliance consultant, right? They don't necessarily want to spend the most. They want to get what they think is the best based on what their needs are. And we'd like to work with that, both when we put tech vendors out there and when we sell our own services. As far as existing third-party relationships are concerned, I think I kind of touched on this already, but I would just emphasize that because we do have such a varied stable of clients, we have a almost equally varied stable of vendors, including tech vendors, that we can usually slot in pretty easily with clients based on needs. And again, I'll go back to cost, make sure that it fits within their budgets. As far as some of the barriers to dealing with existing systems, again, I think the 3 bullet points on that slide sort of speak for themselves. I would note that we have had experience with firms that already have an existing legacy system in place, and either that system needs to be massaged to work with their compliance program as we enhance that compliance program, and to work with new technology that we're introducing into the mix. At times, the answer is get rid of the old system, but we've seen situations where clients are really married to it for one reason or another, and we put ourselves out there to work with them to make it all fit together in a way that is workable going forward. The third bullet point there about customization not being repeatable is important. We try to find systems and solutions that are repeatable, without being purely off the shelf. Ideally, it's a standard solution that allows for some level of customization to make it work for the client, but also make it work for the next client and the next client after that as well. So, we want to avoid having to reinvent the wheel every time we deal with a new vendor situation with a client. And lastly here, in terms of skill sets, the reality is, and I'll speak for myself and most other compliance consultants, we really don't have the kind of technical expertise to give a 100% solid evaluation of a tech services vendor. We educate ourselves as much as possible about the firms we're looking at to at least be in position to say, okay, these 3 or 4 are what you're probably looking for, Mr. Client. They're within your price range, they offer the services, and then it's just a matter of finding a good fit. I can provide a transparent real-world example. Sipperman Compliance Services does have a relationship with Carlos's firm, BasisCode, and we use that system across our entire client base for code of ethics reporting. We've got it down to a science now in terms of integrating the system with the client and getting up and running pretty quickly. And, looking back over the last year or 2 that we've been doing this, we think we're in a place now where we've got it. The clients are good with it. They adapt from their old system pretty effectively, mainly because we've been doing it now for 2 years, and we're sort of off and running quickly with most new client engagements where we implement BasisCode. Carlos, I guess it's fair to throw it to you to see if you have any insights on what that process has been like.
Yeah, I mean, what I can add, as a vendor who's continuously being monitored by hundreds of firms globally with different requirements based upon their jurisdictions or their client types versus RIAs, BDs, banks, whether they're local or international. Your comment regarding effectively managing a technology product requires a different skill set is valid. The product must continue to evolve to meet the new business requirements, provide continuous improvement of existing capabilities while minimizing security risks. One of the things that consultants help do is they ask the right questions on behalf of their clients to technology vendors. And this allows, they have their ear to the ground as requirements change and new regulations pop up, new risks appear. They know to ask the questions to the technology providers that are relevant. In our specific case, the consultants ask us questions. We actually adapt our platform. We allocate resources to design and develop and be able to provide a solution that's best for our clients and our consultant clients as well. So earlier we discussed some of the doubts and concerns about bringing on or starting a consultant relationship. I am certain that many people ask, what happens when I no longer require these services? Janaea, can you talk about how to go about disengaging with a consultant without disruption?
Sure, Carlos. For consultants, this is sort of part of the deal. You want to have a long-term relationship, obviously, with loyal clients. However, many firms also come and go for one reason or another. Things didn't work out with building the business or some other reason. And so maintaining a professional approach is vital to a consulting firm's long-term success. So it's not just the firm that wants a peaceful transition for so many reasons, but the consultants prefer this too. Some firms might grow, and at some point it does make sense to hire a full-time compliance team and dial back on the consulting. So we've suggested this to firms when it's the appropriate time. We just think it's the fair thing to do. If we're seeing that they have this need, their business is complicated, and it's not necessarily, it just doesn't fall into the criteria of what you should be outsourcing. When this happens in any sort of situation, we generally try to make the transition as easy for clients so that they know where their information is, they know how to access it. We meet with the new compliance person that's taking over the program, and we just try to make it, a professional type of relationship. Some consulting firms offer their own in-house technology, just to sort of repeat that conversation. We also use BasisCode because we think it's a great way to present it to clients, because even if the relationship for some reason doesn't work out with the consultant, they decide to bring the compliance in-house, they still have their access to BasisCode, and it's seamless for the client. So I think that offers an advantage for firms to work with consultants that work with BasisCode, because they're not tied to the technology piece. They can change consultants without having to change the technology piece, which I think is a real good aspect.
Thank you, Janaea. So now we have 2 questions, but we're a little bit over time, so we're only going to keep it to 2. The first one I'm going to direct to John. John, can you talk about some of the factors to consider when negotiating the agreement with consultants, and specifically indemnification or hold harmless, limitations of liability, or professional liability insurance, et cetera?
Sure, Carlos. I think a few of the points in negotiating the agreement, as we talked about throughout the webinar, is identify the services and priorities that you need. And that will help you determine whether you need a full outsource or you need support, depending on those services that you need. If you need a named CCO, that obvious liability and that language is baked into the contract. Particular for our firms, the liability is really shared between the entities, depending on the negotiation of the contract. How that liability shifts is on the language, and that could vary from state to state, That could vary in the laws that the contract is under, but for the most part, the CCO is part of management and would be covered under the insurance policy of the client, and we also have professional liability as a consulting firm. I can't speak for all the consulting firms out there, but that's how we handle the fully outsourced. From a support engagement, I think it depends on the types of services that we have and the types of representations that we're making and work that we're putting forth.
Thank you, John. And the last question I'm going to direct to Janea. Can you talk a little bit about geographical locations and also whether state or SEC registered, if it makes a difference? Should your consultant be in the same state as the client, or is it okay to have a longer distance?
So we have both international clients and domestic clients, so it does present challenges trying to be on site, at all of the different firms. But it really comes down to what the business is that the firm, is running. Is it complicated? Is it very sophisticated? Are there a lot of conflicts? There's certain firms that, yes, without a doubt, you need to be on site for some, on some periodic basis. Other firms, it's possible that you could assist the firm with their compliance. If it's a very low-risk advisor, maybe they have a lower budget, they really want to just get the advice like off-site with, a limited type of project. So it's possible to do things off-site. There's no requirement from a legal perspective in any way that the CCO be located in the same location, or that from a state perspective that would be required. But there's definitely pros and cons to evaluate based on your specific business and the specific things that you would like to get from the consultant.
Thank you, Janea. This is the end of our webinar. I'd like to thank the NSCP. I'd like to thank the panelists for attending, and for our attendees who thank you for making the time.
Okay, and on behalf of NSCP, we'd like to thank our panelists very much for their insight and for joining us this afternoon. And thank you very much for our attendees for attending this webinar.